So, I was on vacation last week, and I went to watch a baseball game that my nephew was playing in. My nephew is 12 years old, and it was quite an experience to watch 12-year-olds playing baseball. I have to tell you, it wasn't the most exciting thing in the world. It kind of reminded me of the movie The Bad News Bears. Has anyone ever seen that movie? Put your hands up if you've seen The Bad News Bears. Now, some of you have to complete your education by going and watching this movie. Now, it reminded me of The Bad News Bears because my nephew's team won 13-1, and both teams weren't that good. I mean, it was like, when they did get a hit, like no one caught anything, and even when they fumbled the ball and threw it to another player, they always missed it, and it would go off on the side, and they'd run around the bases. So it reminded me of that scene in the Bad News Bears. Now, you know, sometimes you get like an idea in your head. And though I was on vacation, so I went home from the baseball game, and guess what I did? I watched The Bad News Bears. It had been years since I had seen this movie. So the movie was put out in 1976. And if you want a reminder of how much culture has changed in the last 44 years, just go watch this movie. It tells the story of this washed-out, alcoholic, former pitcher, professional baseball player, who has a job cleaning swimming pools, and he gets paid on the side to go and coach this team of, not exactly the best group of players. So he does it grudgingly. He doesn't really care. He's not really that into it. And Walter Matthau plays the coach. And there's a great scene after their second game. You see, their second game, they did a lot better than in their first game. The second game, they only lost 18-0. And they're sitting after the game, and the coach says this. He says, "Snap out of it, will ya? Nobody said it was going to be easy. Don't look so glum." And the little kid in the middle with the notepad, he's the team's statistician. And he says this: "We committed 24 errors. Their pitcher threw a no-hitter against us. But there is some good news. 2 of our runners almost got to first base, and we did hit 17 foul balls." And the coach replies, "That's right. That's the spirit. Come on, guys. Cokes and hot dogs on me." It's a great movie. Check it out. In the gospel today, Jesus is asked the question, "Lord, will only a few be saved?" And Jesus, in typical fashion, does not directly answer the question. Instead, he states the following. He says, "Strive to enter through the narrow door, for many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able." Strive to enter through the narrow door. For many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able. Now, for many of us, these words of Jesus might make us feel a little uncomfortable. These are strong words. And so I want to delve into this passage a little bit and help us perhaps to reflect on the significance of these words of Jesus. And the first word I want to look at is the word that's translated as strive, to strive. In the original language, this word is the word from which we get the English word agony, agonize, agoniziste in Greek. It comes from a word agonia, where we get the word agony. And for the Greeks, the agonia was a word used to describe what the athletes went through when they competed. So it was that kind of striving that the athletes would undergo. Some translations of the word strive, they render it to try hard to enter through the narrow door. Now, whatever way we translate it, this boils down to the fact that the Christian life is not easy, but it's worth it. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Now, that message may be challenging for some, because I think sometimes if you look at how many Christians live their lives and how they live out following Jesus, if you scratch the surface, it seems to be an underlying principle, an underlying presumption that basically says it is easy. It ought to be easy. It ought not to require any effort. It ought not to require any striving. Jesus said, strive to enter through the narrow door. For many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not. You know, I think today that sometimes not a lot of people even seem to be trying. So these are tough words for us. They call forth this presumption that basically says, you know, in the end, it doesn't really matter. Because the door is not narrow, the door is wide open. And unless you're like a really bad person like Hitler, everyone is just going to tumble in. You don't have to strive, it's a wide door, and many will enter. Most will enter. In a sense, this philosophy says that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how we live our lives. It doesn't matter what we do or what we don't do. It doesn't matter what we believe. Nothing really matters. And we end up in a position that is exactly the opposite of what Jesus spoke about. Now, I want to make a disclaimer here that the whole question of who's in and who's out and who's going to make it and who's not going to make it, that is above our pay grade. Really, it's none of our business. That's implied, I think, by how Jesus answers this man who says, you know, well, many. He's basically like, you know, that's none of your business. You just strive. You strive. Because it's only when we strive that we will thrive. Think about it. Think of all the good things in our lives. I mean, all the good things in our lives, they're only accomplished by hardship, by effort. It's only when we strive that we will thrive. And the gospel goes on to tell us that if we fail to strive, then there may be more at stake than simply not thriving as well as we could. The people in the gospel today, when they hear the words of Jesus, they say, or in the parable, they say, but Lord, we ate and drank with you. What do you mean you don't know us? We ate and drank with you. You preached in our streets. And Jesus says, I don't know who you are. I don't know where you come from. But Lord, we went to church. We got the sacraments. And Jesus says, I don't know where you come from. You see, this challenging gospel calls us to move beyond simply showing up. It challenges to move beyond the mere externals of religious practice. That it's got to go to the heart, because the heart is the source of striving. It calls us to move beyond religious consumerism that has as its highest value convenience, or the lowest price possible. Now, I want to pause there and make a very important point, that as we reflect on the call to strive in following Jesus, that it's important that we don't think about it in the sense that only super Christians will be saved. Unless you score a particular high score, you ain't getting into heaven. That would be a major mistake. It's not like the Olympics. Now, let me ask you a question. What is the minimal qualifying time for the 100-meter dash in the Olympics? Does anyone know? Any guesses? 10.5 seconds. Who here can run the 100-meter dash in 10.5 seconds or less? Anyone? Someone down here. Here's the thing. If after Mass we were all to go out in the parking lot and we were to chalk off 100 meters and I was to get my stopwatch out, I don't think any of us would qualify for the Olympics. But you see, it's not the time that's important. It's whether we strive or not. If we all strove to do the best we could, It would look different for every single person. It would look sometimes, in some instances, it would look pretty messy. But we would be striving. We would be striving. In the movie The Bad News Bears, the coach told the kids that it wasn't going to be easy. Who said it would be easy, he says. And it wasn't easy, but they strove and they thrived. This team of misfits went on to go from the worst team in the league to being the second best team in the league. And they played the championship game against the team that had humiliated them at the beginning of the season. And the coach, played by Walter Matthau, goes through a kind of transformation of his own as he moves from wanting to win at all costs to the final game where he simply tells the kids, go out there and give it your best. Do the best you can. Go out there and thrive. And guess what? They didn't win. They didn't win the championship, but they were all winners. They strove and they thrived. Now, this homily would be incomplete without one very important observation when it comes to the topic of striving to live the Christian life. I want to tell you about an author, theologian, who is also a professor at Boston College University. His name is Dr. Peter Kraft. And every year he used to ask his students the following question at the beginning of the semester. Why should God let you into heaven? Now think about that for a second. Why should God let you into heaven? And over the years, he collated all the answers that people gave. And they were always something like this. I try to be a good person. I haven't murdered anyone yet. I try to be nice. I go to Mass. I pray the Rosary. I'm in the Knights of Columbus. I serve the poor. I'm in a Bible study. Whatever. And he said that all of these answers have one thing in common. Do you know what that is? They're all the wrong answer. Because they focus on what we do for God. And the starting point of salvation in Christian understanding is that Jesus is the source of our salvation. So there's only one real answer to this question, and it's this. Because Jesus Christ died for my sins, and through him and in him I am saved. That's the starting point. We don't put our trust in our own efforts, even if they could be Olympian. We trust in Jesus because salvation is first and foremost about what God has done for us. And in the mystery of grace, we then are called to respond, to strive, to engage the agonia of the Christian life. And if we trust and if we strive, then we will thrive.